Last week on How I Got Here, part 1.
I am actually a social worker. Here's the story about where I came from and how I got here.
And although she said you should think about social work as an undergraduate degree, I said no, and I ended up going to school for a psychology degree. That led me to two options, which was UConn or Southern Connecticut State University. And I was about to encounter some roadblocks you would never even imagine. Welcome to part 2 on how I became a social worker. Now, I actually just got back from a run, like a legitimate run, a 5-mile run on the pavement. It feels so good. If you watched part 1, you know I'm trying to overcome a heel injury. And in that video, I was just dipping my toes in running again. But now I'm actually running and it feels great. But this video is not about my running journey. It's about how I became a social worker. Now, you should watch part 1 if you haven't, just to get yourself up to speed. But at this point in the story, I've now gotten into UConn and I'm beginning my educational journey, right? So I'm starting graduate school. And I thought for sure that if I just got my MSW and got my first job, I'd be smooth sailing on becoming a therapist. It seemed so straightforward in my mind. I get my degree, there's a clinical focus, I get my first job as a therapist, and then I just become a fully independent therapist in the future. But this is actually not what happened. I hit a ton of road bumps, I had a lot of delays, and a lot of unexpected things happen. And that's what I'm gonna share with you today. But before we jump into that story, I actually have a really tall order for today. I actually have to write the script for part 3 of this video. I'm going on vacation soon and will not be able to write the script there. And so I wanna get ahead on that. Now the problem is, it is almost 9:30 right now, and I only have until 12 to plan out the script and write it out because my son is coming home and then I'll be watching him for the rest of the day. And he's a little kid, and if you have a little kid or you know about watching little kids, you're not really gonna get much done after they're home. So within that amount of time, not only do I have to write the whole script, but I also have to get ready for the day and shower after this run, and I have some administrative things to do as well. So you're gonna come along with me on that journey. We're gonna see if we can get it all done by 12 o'clock, and I'm also gonna tell you this story along the way. Let's go. All right, so we are all showered up, and the first thing on the admin list is always water and coffee, especially after a run. And now some quick email and admin things. All right, so I finally got my writing space set up. I do like to create a little separation from my desk where I do all my other work. I think it helps me get a little bit more creative. But let's actually jump into the real story. So it leaves off with me going to UConn for my MSW program. Now, most MSW programs are 2 full years, and that's the one I enrolled in. Some are 1 year, and actually mine would have been 1 year if I listened to my mom and had gotten a bachelor's in social work.
Ma, the meatloaf!
But I was stubborn and didn't listen, so now I was enrolled in a 2-year program. Now, most MSW programs have 2 main components. They have the coursework, and then they have the internship experience. And these internships are almost like part-time jobs. And a lot of your coursework and projects are actually based off of your experience in the internship. And they're also really important because they go on your resume, and they're essentially like your first quote-unquote jobs that people see when you're applying for jobs as a new master's level social worker. So they're really important. And this is actually where I hit my first roadblock. And I didn't realize this at first, but when I applied for the UConn program, the main campus that they have the program is in West Hartford, which is more of an urban area. And there's a lot of opportunities for different internships. I actually lived about an hour away in a much smaller area, and there wasn't many opportunities for internships there. And I needed my internship to be closer to home because my commute was just too long to do every single day. So this is barrier number 1. And the good news was my first year, I get an internship really close to my home that's clinical in nature, working in a mental health clinic with adults. And it was really good. Supervisor was great. I learned a ton. awesome, awesome experience. And year number 2, I actually find another clinical internship in the town that's really close to where I live. So it's really great. However, this one is working with children in a school. Now, this was a very valuable experience. I learned a ton. It was really clinical. I did a lot of one-on-one work with the kids. And I also realized after that internship that although working there was a really wonderful experience, my strength really lied in working with adults, which is obviously what I do today. However, what I didn't realize was that having that final year internship in a school on my resume was probably gonna hurt me when applying for jobs with adults. So here we are, I finished my internships, I finished my MSW program, I'm sending off applications to all these different jobs where I'd be working with adults in a clinical setting. And I'm actually not hearing much back, and I'm wondering why. Now, I didn't realize this at the time, but fast forward a few months, and I'll get to this part a little bit later in the story. I'm actually having a meeting with a director of a social work department, and they only had my resume before meeting me, and initially they had thought that I wanted to work with kids. And that was just based off of reading my resume. So now, as I look back at this experience, I think that as I applied for these jobs with adults in a clinical setting, my application was just being discarded because people thought that I wanted to work with children. And so now here we are applying for jobs and I'm not getting many leads. So this is actually really discouraging and another major roadblock. But this wasn't the only roadblock. Actually, after getting my first job, I hit more roadblocks and even bigger roadblocks. And that's what we're gonna talk about in just a second. But time is actually ticking here. It's now almost 10:40 and I still have a lot more to do on this script. So let me start writing a little bit. All right, so I think I officially hit some writer's block and I need some more coffee and definitely to go for a little walk. Let's head out the door and I'll tell you the rest of the story and I'll share with you the other barriers that I started to hit, which believe it or not, only get harder and bigger. All right, so I always have a hard time finding a spot in New York that's not loud or crowded. So I'm in a spot that's not crowded, but it's loud. There's a highway like 200 yards that way. There's crickets, so I apologize. I hope you can hear. But anyway, I had a connection in a hospital here in New York, one of the large hospitals here. And I ended up reaching out to them after not being able to find success on my own. And they were able to actually give me an opportunity. Now the caveat here was it was not in the social work department. It wasn't a social work job at all. In fact, it was a job in HR. Now I was young and naive and I'm someone who likes a challenge. So I thought, okay, let me take a job in HR. It doesn't have anything to do with what I went to school for, but I'll be able to network my way in. So I ended up taking this job in HR. Now it was a very odd HR position. It was in the HR department, but I was gonna be located in the primary care doctor's office. And so that's where I was. And I was gonna be doing some HR responsibilities in primary care. It was a decent job, I learned a lot, but my main goal was to become a social worker. So I ended up packing up all my stuff and moving to New York City to take on my first job. And I was super excited. I get the job, I start, and my first order of business was to start networking. I mean, like right away, networking. And I didn't just start with the people around me. I decided to email the director of the entire department of social work in the hospital. This is like the highest of the high in the social work department. And she accepts the meeting and I have it set up. Now I remember thinking, all right, I'm gonna go into this meeting and we're gonna have a conversation. I'm gonna network, I'm gonna share with her my experience and show her what I can do. And I'll leave with a new opportunity probably in the social work department. So I set up this meeting. I think I put on a suit and tie also to go. That was not the dress code where I worked, but I wanted to really impress. So I go to the meeting and I was discouraged. I'll have to be honest. The first thing she said to me, I think it was one of the first things, was that I wanted to work with kids. Like that's what she thought. And I told you earlier, I didn't want to work with kids. I wanted to work with adults. And she said that she thought that because of what was on my resume. And that's when the light bulb went off, that people were probably thinking that I wanted to work with children. And so I had to spend some time convincing her that that's not what I wanted to do. And I actually wanted to work with adults, and I've had some valuable experiences. I actually have a part-time job working with adults. And so that was good, it was a good learning opportunity to realize how important my resume was and my experiences were as I worked towards becoming a therapist, a clinical social worker. Now that wasn't the most discouraging part. The other part that was really discouraging was that she told me that I would most likely need to leave the hospital
Run home!
Run home, run home.
and come back with more experience. That's right. Now this is fresh off of accepting a job and moving to the city for that job. And she said I would probably need to leave and come back. Wow, now that one felt like a real gut punch. And so now here I am after this meeting, and I have two things that I'm really taking away. One, I need to make sure my resume is in line with what I want to do and it's actually oriented the right way. And number two, I might have to look for another job outside the hospital. Oh my gosh, this did not feel very good. This was not the meeting I had envisioned. All right, we're back. We're all fueled up on coffee. We got a nice stretch in. We are ready to go. And I actually only have about a half an hour before I have to finish writing the script. And I have a lot more to go. So I'm actually feeling a little bit anxious about that. But let me finish off the rest of this part of the story for you. So now here we are. I've left the meeting with the director of the hospital, the Department of Social Work, and now I'm really discouraged, but I'm also motivated. I'm discouraged because she said I might need to leave and get a job somewhere else and then come back. But I'm also motivated because I don't like to fail and I like a challenge. So I'm thinking, you know what? I think I'm gonna try to get a job in this hospital, and that's what I'm gonna do. So anyway, I leave and I have a mixed bag of emotions. Every day that goes by, I get more and more frustrated and more discouraged. And I feel like my journey to becoming a therapist is getting delayed. But I eventually make a connection with the director of the primary care office where I'm located. And she actually let me know that, oh yeah, we're gonna be looking for a social worker at some point. We're just working through opening up a position. Now in these hospitals, these huge institutions, it can be forever to open up a position. I mean, I don't know what happens on the back end, but there's a lot, all right? So on one hand, they need to open up a position. And then number two, she let me know that I needed to pass my LMSW test. And I forgot to mention this before, but in addition to your supervision, you need to obtain 2 licenses in order to become a therapist. Your first one happens right after completing your graduate program, and this is called the LMSW, Licensed Master Social Worker. It is simply a test. Now, I hadn't studied for this and I hadn't prepared for this quite yet, so now that became my focus. Now, I needed this license, she said, to get the job, if one was to open. Now, that was a lot of pressure, and I don't do well under pressure. So I started to study. I study and I study and I study, and I pass. And I'm like, yes, this is it. I'm gonna get this job when it opens up. And I was so excited. But after I passed this test, the job didn't open up. And in fact, I wasn't sure if it was gonna open up at all. So now I have my license, I'm really motivated, and now I'm really eager to get a social work job, right? So I start actually applying within the hospital for different social work jobs that are clinical in nature. I start applying outside the hospital, and I'm thinking, well, maybe this person was right. I might need to go outside. And I'm not getting any leads. And I'm getting a couple interviews here and there, but positions were freezing and I just wasn't getting any job offers. And so I was actually becoming more and more discouraged. So what I did in the meantime was actually get a part-time job. So after my HR job, full-time at the hospital, I would ride my bike downtown, and I was working in a substance abuse clinic. It was actually an outpatient detox center, and I was actually doing therapy with clients there. And this was 3 nights a week, and it was really good. So I was really excited about this. I was finally doing clinical work. I was using my license. I was working as a clinical social worker, and it was awesome. I was getting great supervision. I loved it. The problem was it was after work. It was in addition to my full-time job. 8 months goes by. I'm doing this part-time job, which is great, but I'm still working in HR and not doing anything clinical in the hospital. 8 months. And like I mentioned before, you need a minimum of 3 years of supervised experience. And my supervised experience was now about 8 months delayed in terms of the hospital supervision because I wasn't doing anything clinical. And so now I'm really discouraged. But finally, I can remember the director of the Department of Primary Care said the position was opening and I could apply for it. I was like, okay, this is it. This is gonna be a great first job for me at the hospital. And so I apply and I don't get it. I'm just kidding. I actually got the job. I have a full-time job at the hospital, but it is part-time social work and part-time HR. And on the side, I'm working 3 to 4 nights a week at this clinic downtown getting my clinical experience. But I was on cloud 9. I now had a social work job in the hospital that I did not have to leave for. I was now getting supervision at the hospital and at the clinic downtown. And on top of that, I got to keep my HR role, which was like a pretty cool thing to add to my resume. And it really helped me learn about the hospital and the way it works. And this was really, really awesome. And I do this for a while, and I love it. It's a great job, it's a great gig. But again, it was not all smooth sailing from here. In fact, things only got harder, but that's a story for another day. And now I actually have to finish up this script. I only have about 20 minutes before my son comes home.